This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. And if you could, please do me a favor and take a moment and leave a rating and review in whatever podcast player you're listening to this on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, doesn't matter. I would greatly appreciate it. And that feedback really helps get other listeners to the show. Also, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you feel so inclined, you can go to geekleader.com/tip and donate to the show. Thanks so much. All right, Geek Leaders, today I'm honored to have Rob Snyder on the show. He is a serial startup founder, fellow at Harvard Innovation Labs, and a graduate of the Harvard Business School. And he's also the author of a book called The Power of Pull, which we're going to talk about today. So with that being said, Rob, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to be here.
If you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about how you got into entrepreneurship. And honestly, just a background, that was my undergraduate major was entrepreneurship, and why you got into that and how you decided to write this book.
Yeah, so my undergraduate major, I wish it was in entrepreneurship. It was in political theory for no reason. And then I went and worked at a consulting firm called McKinsey for 2 years. And that was a lot of fun. Got into HBS, Harvard Business School, and knew I did not want to go and do more consulting stuff in big companies. And I was like, all right, well, I watched The Social Network. Entrepreneurship seems cool. Why not give that a try? And so I basically spent my entire time at HBS and before, a year before HBS, started to dig into startups, try to read everything I possibly could, try to figure out how to start one of these super cool companies. And coming out of HBS, I raised some money, started to build a startup, made a ton of sense in theory, and then just got punched in the face for a couple years in practice until it actually started working. So, that's the potted history.
Yeah. So startups can be hard. For sure. I think a lot of people see the glamour of them. The one thing that helped me a lot is there was a documentary called Startup.com that came out when I was in college. And I was forced to watch that in my entrepreneurship class. And I was like, man, this sucks. Like, this is a lot of work. So tell me what you kind of learned throughout your journey and why you decided to put this book together.
Yeah, so I went through all the kind of like books and all the classes that I could possibly have taken on entrepreneurship, and I'd read all the frameworks and, was kind of following all the processes that I could possibly follow, doing a bunch of customer research and interviews and trying to experiment and all that kind of stuff. And basically what I learned is you can come up with something that solves a real problem and pain point, that provides a ton of value that customers say they really want, and they will by default not buy it.
Yep.
Which did not seem like it was physically possible in my mind. Like, I was like, I can save you $1 million a year. How could you not buy this? And it turns out they're very happy not buying something that could save them $1 million a year, or whatever the value prop could have possibly been. And so I had to learn that the hard way, because I'd try to go and sell something, build the plan. It made sense. There's like a long-term vision behind it. Try to go sell it. Nobody bought. And I wasn't sure if it was like, I'm just terrible at sales or something else. And so I went through that cycle like 8 times in 2 years. And then randomly we had something take off and go 0 to 4 million ARR in 2 years. But it like broke my brain when it happened.
Yeah, I can definitely feel you, and I've been there too, where things just didn't make sense, and you don't know why. And because when you're in business school, you learn about supply and demand, and if if there's a demand, then you have supply, and so how it balances out. You don't really like get into the fact that, like, well, what makes someone want this product?
Yeah.
And so what did you learn when you had that success, that $0 to $4 million success on that product, and how have you incorporated that going forward?
Yeah, so the weird thing was the idea didn't come from me that went from 0 to 4 million.
Mhm.
And the product didn't exist. And when the product didn't exist and was basically me in a spreadsheet trying to manually fulfill it, customers were happier than they had ever been when I had an actual product that I had built, which broke my brain. And they couldn't I was selling them a software product. They couldn't log into the software product, and they were thanking me for being unable to log into the software product, which
Wow.
just confused me. It was just so weird. And what I realized was that nobody actually wants your product. Nobody has ever wanted a product. Nobody has ever wanted Salesforce. Nobody's ever woken up in the morning and said, you know, B2B software. Today's the day I get to buy B2B software or anything. And so what I realized is it was way less about the product. And it was like, they're trying to do something in their life and they're stuck. And if I can get them unstuck, they don't care if I have a fleet of parakeets that's like doing it for them in the background. They're just good. They will rip it out of my hands. But if they're not stuck or if they're not trying to do something, I can throw out the coolest pitch. I can pull together the most amazing product. I can have this really compelling value proposition. And it would be weird if they bought from me, no matter like what I did.
Yeah, yeah. As you're saying that, it reminds me of a story. I met a guy named Bob Young. He was the co-founder of Red Hat. And we've all heard of Red Hat, Linux distribution. And he told me that the way that they started wasn't because anybody wanted to buy Red Hat. It was because he found this niche company, really small company called IBM back then, that wanted to use open source software, but they had a policy that would not allow them to use software that didn't have support. So he decided to slap a label on an open source Linux software and said, I'll offer support if you buy my software. And they bought it by the troves. And it turns out AT&T had the same policy and all these big companies had these same policies. So they all bought Red Hat and that's how he started it. It was, nobody wanted to buy his software. They just needed to. Because some reason.
Right. They were trying to use open source software and they were blocked from using it and they were blocked from doing what they wanted to do. And so no one and the cool thing is the kind of confusing thing, when you find this thing, people behave as if they want your software.
Yes.
They will thank you. They thanked me despite, the product being a pile of garbage for the first year, right? And they go, oh, this is the greatest thing ever. I had one of the startups that I helped, they had a customer say to them, wow, this must be how Alexander Graham Bell felt when he invented the telephone. Your product is so amazing. And they're like, it's not that good.
Right.
and so, but it's, you have to find people who are trying to do something and stuck. And that's what I call the pull framework. And so, so we could talk about that a little bit more, but it's
let's dive right in, because what is the pull framework? Where did that name come from, and kind of how can entrepreneurs learn from this?
Yeah, so what I learned on the pull framework is that there are a lot of things that we talk about, things like problems and pain points that sound like they should lead to purchases, but don't. Most of the time, don't. People can complain about their pain points and problems basically indefinitely. And so they will not buy if they have a problem or a pain point. And so we have to stop thinking about problems and pain points, but that means we also have to have some other way to think about what if present will cause somebody to buy from us. And that's where the pull framework comes in. There's 4 components to the pull framework, which if they are present all together, somebody would basically be weird not to buy your product. They will pull it out of your hands, buy it without convincing most of the time. And so the 4 components, if you just think of it, PULL, it's an acronym. There's a project on their to-do list, P. They're trying to do something. That project is unavoidable. There's in some situation where they can't delay it, they can't avoid it, they can't do something else. PU, then the L's are, there's a list of options, and those options to get that project done have limitations. So they basically can't get the project done. So in your example, it's, I'm trying to use the open source software that I need right now, because for some reason, technically, we need it for some reason. But just using it myself, just using it internally is not an option, because our IT department has a policy that we can't use any software that doesn't have support. And so those things, when present, tell you exactly like who will rip a product out of your hands and what the product needs to be. That just tells you those things say, oh, we should offer a support policy for open source software. That's it. And you say that, and they say, oh my gosh, I've needed that forever. Let me buy it immediately.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get that. And when you put that together, so how do you navigate like using the pull method to sell your product? Because
Yeah.
like you said, no one wants your product. So how do you discover um what is the project? How is it unavoidable? What are the like how do you put all that together?
Yeah, so it's super cool that so it's just started as me trying to understand why does anyone
Hmm.
buy anything? But this framework has turned into something that you use to define your ICP, to define what your product requirements are at the highest possible level. And it's a sales framework now that like sales teams use. And so in a sales call, for example, you say something like, "Hey, why'd you take the call today? What are we talking? What are you hoping? What are you trying to solve in your business? What are you trying to do in your business?" And they will usually tell you a long monologue that you can use to fill out the boxes in the pull framework. You say, "Oh wow, it sounds like you're trying to use this open source software. Da-da-da. Why didn't you just use that yourself?" Right? And so what I found is that it's in sales calls, if you just have the pull framework up and you ask them, what are they trying to solve? What are they trying to do in their business? What have they looked into? Why isn't that good enough? You fill out the pull framework, and that's the first half of the sales call. The second half of a sales call is saying, well, it sounds like if you're in that situation, you're looking for something kind of like this. Is that right? And that's it. And like that's the structure of a sales call. And you can use that for a sales call. And then you take that as a template and you say, oh, that one person was trying to install this kind of open source software, but that I wonder if other people are like that. And so the pull framework becomes a template that you can then go out and say, oh, maybe this thing repeats a bunch of times. And maybe we need to change some pieces of it. But you come up with one repeatable pull framework for selling your business.
Yeah, yeah, I totally get that. So if you're a new entrepreneur and well, what if you don't even have an idea yet? What if you don't have like a product, but you want to build something? You want to vibe code something, and you want to get it out there and
Yeah.
say. So how do you start?
Yeah, usually you start by vibe coding your first thing, trying to push it out the world,
Yeah,
getting
and
punched in the face for a few months,
and
and
then it
then
breaks.
and then it breaks, none of it works, and then you do this. So there's a friend out of business school that I talk about in the book, and what he did is he had no idea what he wanted to build. He had no idea who to sell to, what to build, and it's like in that situation you probably shouldn't start a company, but whatever. Like if you really are dead set on founding a company, you should do kind of what he did. So he wrote out a list of potential customer segments that he might want to serve. It
Okay.
went from I think he started with solar panel installers, and then there was like a long list. And his approach was like, I don't, just to be honest, I have no idea what to build for them. I have no idea. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach out to them and see if I can just shadow them. And I'm going to go follow them around for a day if they'll let me, a couple days. And I'll do that a bunch of times to see one, if I like them, and two, do they have any things on their to-do lists that they're stuck with that I could possibly offer them to be unstuck? And so he went and talked to solar panel installers. He hated them. They hated him. And so he's like, all right, not them. Worked his way down to like physical therapists, practice owners, small business
Okay.
owners, really liked the vibes there and just would follow them around. And he watched them doing their job. And you see them like typing into something on their computer and they're just like angry while typing. He's like, what? Yep. What are you trying to do there? Like, what's going on? And
And
he's in his head trying to fill out a pull framework. And once he kind of like has a hypothesis, he then says, okay, so it seems like you're trying to do da 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 da. What if I offered something like this? Right. And then you just see what happens with that person. And that person will often be like, oh my gosh, that's exactly the thing.
Yep.
That'd be amazing. That'd save me so. And then you don't just go and say, great, I found it. I got to go build it now. You do that to 5 more people. You go talk to 5 other people just like that and say, hey, I was just talking with Jim. I was just shadowing Jim over here. He was trying to do da 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 da, but he was stopped because his existing tool da 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 da. Right. And it what about you? Are you different from that? And the goal is to go like 3 out of 5 or 5 out of 5 before you've built a product. And if you go 3 out of 5, 4 out of 5, 5 out of 5, people said, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I need. Great. You're done.
you got something. Yeah.
You got something to build.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a great way to figure out how to get started and get the ball rolling on what your product is going to be and who your clients are. Because right now you already have people that are almost, they got really close to committing that they want this thing. So you're already on track for that first half, I guess.
Yeah, what I say too is what you're typically told to do now is do like 100 customer discovery interviews.
Mhm.
I just find that I find a lot of startups will do that. They will come to a very strong conviction. Another friend did, I think, 250 customer discovery interviews, found a pain point that people consistently ranked 9 or 10 out of 10, brought on design partners, tried to sell, and nobody bought. And so this approach, the kind of traditional customer discovery approach, you're going to learn a lot of things, some of which are not true because you're not trying to sell. I really like going the try to sell approach and get firsthand experience so that you don't wind up 6 to 12 months down the road with a lot of spreadsheets filled out, a lot of research done, and no business built.
Yeah, I like that too. I like, picking, someone that you can kind of I want to, I mean, I guess you call it partner with, like that's going to use your product. Maybe they're the first alpha user of your product and you build it along with them and you meet all their needs. Because if it works for, this one physical therapist over here, it's probably going to work for, all of them or most of them or, a large portion of them. And I can figure out all the problems and all the pain points that they have and solve for those so that when I want to have my first public launch, it's ready.
Right. And you probably want to do that with like 3 to 5
Right. Yeah.
initial ones. You don't want to just do it with one. You don't want to call them design partners. That's another thing. I feel like there are some startup concepts that were forged in the fires of Mordor. Pain points, design partners, like these things are so counterproductive. They just should be customers. And they're just your early customers who get early access, but they're customers. And you work with them, but they're not in it to design software. They're not Steve Jobs. They're trying to get their own jobs done.
Right. So So in your book, you talk a lot about like what happens if you have a product that's just not gaining traction, and it's a good product, and it's something that you've met with some people early on, and you built what you think is the right product, but you're just not getting traction with anybody. What do you do differently?
Yeah. So it depends if you have what the typical thing is you have a couple customers who really like it
Yeah,
and it's hard to repeat. And you might have in 10 sales calls, you might have one person who's actually like, "Oh wow, this is actually the thing for me." Or it's often something like that and just feels like a slog. I call that like time to debug, where it's not quite clear why the one person likes it and the 10 people don't. And so what I recommend doing there is writing out the pull frameworks of the people you talk to and just comparing and contrasting the people who actually seem to have pull and the people who don't. And so a friend had this for their startup where they were at like 1 million in revenue or something like that. And it was good, but it was like a slog growing.
yeah,
And they'd have, I don't know, I feel like they'd have a bunch of sales calls, and it wasn't even that sales calls went bad. People were like, "Oh wow, this is great," and then they just like wouldn't buy. And so for them, had to compare and contrast the people who bought fast with the people who just were like pleasant sales calls and didn't buy. And what they realized when that was the case was that there was something that had happened in the world of the people who bought fast before they had talked to them. And it was in their case, they were selling HR software. And it was the case that these people had run a group training for a small group of employees. And they were just told, "Hey, okay, cool. You ran that training for 20 employees. Let's keep it as engaging, but let's run that for 2,000 employees in 3 months." And they're like, "Okay, cool. We have one person who could do that here. I need to go from training 20 people to 2,000 people. How the heck am I going to do that? I'm stuck." That had happened there. In every other case where that hadn't happened, they would, hear people talking about their product, and people would nod and be like, "Wow, this is amazing. This could really change things." And they would by default do nothing because they didn't have to do any.
yeah. So, so how do you get out of the rut? Like when you're in that rut and you see differences, you see things, but like some of it's motivation, right? You feel like you're demotivated. How do you get out of
Yes.
that? How do you get
Oh
those little
gosh.
wins that build that up?
Often I've found there's two things. One is realizing that this is just part of the journey
Yes.
and that it's not an indictment of your skills. They People will not rip your product out of your hands unless they are stuck trying to do something.
Bingo. Yeah.
If that's not the case, then you can have the best sales skills in the world. Like you can be an excellent seller. You can do all the things. You can follow all the playbooks, and it's just not going to work by default. And it's going to be really hard by default. And so you kind of have to take the pressure off your own shoulders and say, okay, I need to be looking not for the thing that I can improve, but what's the thing in their world of the people who are buying fast, so that I just find more people like that. Because right now I'm playing on hard mode, and I hate myself, and I need to like get out of that.
Yeah. So one of the things you talk about in your book is you have a whole section on staying sane as a founder. Tell us a little bit about that, and like when we hit those hard times, how do we do that?
That's why. So the funny thing is, every time I talk to anybody who's a founder or who has founded or led anything,
Uh,
this is the last chapter in the book. Every single time, I assume most people don't make it. Every single person that I talk gets to that part and asks about it. So the main thing that I recommend is realizing that demand exists out there in the world.
it does. Yeah.
You do not control it. You do not influence it. You just have to fight it. We often feel like there's so much pressure on us to make other people want our product. That is an impossible thing. You shouldn't even try. It's just not going to happen. They're not going to wake up one morning and say, you know what? I've been convinced to want this agentic ERP software. Nobody will do that. And so that's the first thing, is get that weight off of your shoulders. And then the second thing is realize what the job actually is, which is it's not about building a fancy technology. We all love our products. We all care about building something that is awesome. That's actually not the job. The job is just to serve people who are stuck. And when you feel like it's about your product, you having to have the vision, you having to push this thing into the world and convince people, you're just thinking about it entirely backwards, and you're setting yourself up for some awful, awful pain. There's nothing that is worse than feeling like you're pushing something onto a market that doesn't care. And so avoid that. Realize you're serving people who are stuck. You're helping them do really important things. They are the main character in the story. And if that energizes you, amazing. Go build it. If that doesn't energize you, don't build anything. Go work a job. This is a service job.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think that's where a lot of people, they think of, founders and, is co-founder, CEO, I'm going to be, it's an ego thing, but you really
Yes.
got to put that to bed completely if you want to be successful, because like you said, it's about serving someone else. And,
Yes.
I ran a startup for 8 years before, I was able to successfully exit and sell that. And, during that time, I never felt like I was doing my thing. I always felt like I was doing, this company's thing, that company's thing, this company's thing. Whoever was my client, that's the thing I was doing right then. And it was never my thing until I got rid of it. And then I was like, that was my thing. And I didn't
Yeah.
really realize it at the time.
Yeah. Then it's like it's learning to be energized by that.
Mhm.
You're so right. It's just you go into a startup because you're like, I don't want to work for somebody else. And
Yeah.
guess what? You wind up working for everybody else
Yep.
as a
Exactly.
leader of a startup.
Yep. Exactly. And I think that's a key point right there, because people think, well, I got to be my own boss. Well, no, everybody's going to be your boss.
Yes, yeah, your employees are your boss. You're like it's
Yeah.
and there are nuances to it, but that's generally the way to think about it. Like, and definitely customers are the boss, because if you don't help them accomplish what they're trying to accomplish, they're like you're not going to have customers.
Yeah, 100%. I don't know if we talked about this along the way or not, but if you could just hit up a little bit about what is the bottom up model and how should we think about that?
Yeah, so the bottom up model is a way to think about startups that's way different than what I was taught to think about startups. I was taught to think about startups from a top down perspective. And if you ever have the misfortune of reading VCs talking about anything online, you'll see they talk from a top down approach, which is, oh, this market is growing at X% per year. And, it's about market sizes, it's about personas, it's about abstractions, it's about things over time. The bottom-up model is it starts from the perspective of an individual customer and an individual person, not even a persona, human being, and building up from there. And so top-down kind of does the market scan, the market analyses, comes up with a business case, comes up with all that kind of stuff. It's the kind of stuff that I did and a lot of kind of MBA type founders or consulting type founders will do because we think we're supposed to have a market thesis and build a plan and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And then we get punched in the face with when individual customers don't buy because they don't care. And so that's where the bottoms-up model comes in. It says, let's not come up with these grand theories. Let's focus on what individual customers need. And once we understand what individual customers have pull for and what we can build for them, and we can repeat that, then from there we can generate the kind of broader, longer term view instead of coming at it from the opposite direction. And that's what I recommend business schools start teaching entrepreneurship as. It's a fundamentally bottom-up thing of one customer at a time, finding repeatability, finding the shared traits, and letting that generate everything else, versus what we're typically taught, where it's a thing of analyzing markets and opportunities and gaps and whatnot.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I found the real world is definitely bottom up more so than market analysis, business plan, execute. It's the other way around. Start executing and figure it out along the way.
I don't know. The central planning did not work in the Soviet case. It does not seem to work in entrepreneurship either.
Yeah, 100%. I think you're absolutely right. Rob, this has been a fun conversation, and I really feel like I've learned a lot. I'm sure our audience did too. How can they learn more, pick up a copy of your book, and connect with you online?
Yeah, so I'm at LinkedIn Rob Snyder 1, I think.
I'll link it in the show notes. Yeah, Snyder 1. Yep.
Yeah, R Snyder 1. And then my book is Power of Pull, and my website is robsnyder.org.
Awesome. And I'll put that in the show notes too at geekleader.com so people can go there and click through. Again, Rob, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I had a fun time.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Please go to geekleader.com to learn more about what this guest is up to. Click on their links and connect with them online. I would also greatly appreciate it if you could leave me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. Make sure you've subscribed if you haven't already. And if you feel so inclined, you can leave me a tip by going to geekleader.com/tip.